you can get it all from back here.
Let's see what's going on. I thought him probably still inspired might say something.
Did you sign up?
Look at straight.
You ready? You ready? Yes. Call to order.
Okay, if we can get everybody's attention, we're about to begin this meeting. This is the last of the public meetings that the Louisville Comprehensive Review Commission will be holding. I know there are a number of people who signed up. If anybody is in the audience who has not signed up, if we have time at the end of those who have signed up, you can come forward. So long as you mention your name, we'll be fine. I think, as you all know, the purpose of the commission was to review the merged government, which was finalized in 2003, and to report back to the state legislature anything that may be done to improve it, whether there are any deficiencies that need to be addressed, whether there are any accomplishments that need to be called out. And that's what our purpose is. We'll be wrapping up our responsibilities in September, and so we thought that it was obviously critical that we get the input from residents of the county, from citizens, which is why we started holding these meetings. Let's begin. My name is Earl Jones. I'm an attorney here in Jefferson County in Louisville, and I'm co-chairing the commission, and I'm going to let my co-chair introduce himself, and then the other commissioners will introduce themselves.
We're on TV tonight, so I apologize for throwing pins back and forth. My name is Jason Nemes. I'm a state representative. There's a 33rd district, Linden, Middletown, Anchorage, goes to the county line, and then into Oldham and Shelby counties a little bit. We'll go through, starting with Ken at the top and around. Everybody introduce themselves, and then we will have the remarks from the citizens.
Good evening, I'm Ken Fleming. I represent the 48th District, which is the northeast part of Jefferson County and also goes into Oldham County and such. I was on Metro Council for about 12 years and been in this position for about 6 years.
Good evening, I'm Scott Schoenberger. I'm the president and CEO of the L.J. Schneider Company here in downtown. So we own various properties and a city-owned family company here in Louisville, and I am a GLI representative on the commission. Thank you.
Hi, Shelby Somerville. I do government affairs for Greater Louisville, Inc., which is the Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, I'm Julie Rocky Adams, State Senator from District 36, which is Eastern Jefferson County.
I'm Senator Mike Nemes from Bullitt County in South Jefferson County.
Mayor Bonnie Jung, a mayor of the City of Douglas Hills, past president of the Jefferson County League of Cities.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Butler. I am the mayor's designee on this committee, and I served 12 years on Metro Council. And I also want to say Councilwoman Cindy Fowler couldn't be here this evening. She's got a neighborhood meeting in her district, which is a conflict. And I don't know if you want to recognize some of the council people that are in the audience as well.
Please do that.
Okay, we got Councilwoman Paula McCraney and Councilman Kumar Rashad and Councilman Kevin Kramer. What? Oh, Councilwoman Donna Purvis. Okay. I didn't see you back there.
Okay, so here's how we're going to do this if we could. We're going to have 3 minutes to speak, and then I will tell you that once your time is up, you'll have another 30 seconds. I'm not a stickler on the second by second, so if you go a little bit longer, I'm okay, but we're going to keep it pretty tight to that, and I'll let people close if they have a closing sentence or two, but we're going to try to keep it close to those times as we have. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to call the first person, and the second person, please come down so we won't lose any time. Although I'm not sure that's going to make much of a difference tonight. It might. Mr. Frazier, you're up first, and Ms. Maxwell, you are second.
Thank you. Does it work? Okay. Lucas Frazier. So I was born into a single-parent family, 3 of us and my mom, so 4-person family. And when I was 5, my mom remarried. And she had, the husband had 4 kids of his own. He was unemployed. And it was really hard in the beginning. It was an amazing God story. And over 4 decades, they've been together 41 years this year. But I can tell you, after over 4 decades, there's still talk of that side of the family and our side of the family. And we never really blended. It's been so amazing to watch and yet hard. 20 years ago, the county and the city merged. In effect, it was like a marriage. And I didn't have a vote in it. A lot of people didn't have. We were like the kids who were just part of this, union that took place. And a lot of things happened that has changed the way that things have been done. Outside the county, they set up the rules and ideas for the way Floyd's Fork would be handled, the way the land would be handled. And it's been being taken away, apart. Even today was the last day to put in comments about Floyd's Fork because they're rewriting it. And it's really important to the people in the county. But it's just not that seeming care or concern for people. And it's not a representation thing. I am blown away by our Metro Council members. And I was looking at the sign back there, and Councilmember Kramer, he goes from the Eastwood all the way down to 6 Mile Lane. When I lived in Buchel, he represented me there. It's a huge area. What we really need is to break up the representation in other areas, not just in the Metro Council area, but also in, say, the planning design. Planning design, the mayor sets the planning director has a planning commission, and there needs to be representation of the different areas and the way that the land moves and works. And I just really feel that's a big part of what we need in merger, is that care across, not just inside the city or even inside the certain highways, but across the whole city, so that we do feel like family, so we'll feel loved. That is what's missing, is that care of all the citizens across the way. And I went to the Eastern meeting, and I shared what's going on kind of in Eastwood and those kinds of things. But I was really felt led to share just my story, my testimony of my family. after 40 years, they love each other well. And it's possible that 20 years from now, we look back and say, yeah, we changed the direction of this city, and we really find a way to love each other well. So thank you very much for letting me come up here and share my story.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Maxwell, and then Mr. Tonini. Okay, if Ms. Maxwell doesn't want to speak, or Mr. Tonini, I can't, it's Bill Flarsheim. And Mr. Flarsheim, my name is Nemes, and nobody gets it right, so I apologize. Okay, all right. Mr. Flarsheim, you're up.
Okay. Little sooner than I thought I'd be. Yeah, my name's Bill Flarsheim. I live in Tyler Park in the Highlands. I was born and raised in eastern Jefferson County, grew up in Windy Hills, and left for 40 years. And growing up, I remember there was a campaign, Louisville, city of the 70s, and to really revitalize the city, and it really didn't work. And I think that may feed some of where we ended up now, because I come back now, and part of it's because this is a great, vibrant city. This is a wonderful place, and it's affordable. And I love it. I go walking after dark. It doesn't worry me. We got a great thing here. I think maybe because of the decades of when it was hard to get development, nobody wants to stand in the way of anything. And I don't want to stand in the way of development. We need more, but I think the city has the clout to force people closer to the main arteries, force them close to the inner city. If they want to build more housing, we need more housing. It doesn't have to be in green space in Eastwood or Valley Station or farther than that. And maybe that's where the city doesn't realize how good it is and is not getting as much control about where the development goes and how it fits in with the character of the city we got now. And I've listened to a lot of the meeting recordings of other places, and I think that's kind of what I picked out with it, that development's good, development's important, but we don't have to completely roll over and put it everywhere, because things like Floyd's Fork and Jefferson Memorial Fork, those are important too. Those are why people come here. We can't make it impossible to get there because of traffic or let Banks Road away, right? E-road away. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So, excuse me, are you suggesting that there be some changes or constraints, or what would you like to see happen as a result of the concern you've expressed?
I think dense development in the outer parts of the county probably needs to pay for more roads and be kept farther away from things like streams. And maybe some more incentives to build inside the watershed, go higher. I spent a few years in China where 20 years ago they were building 6 stories and now they're building 25 and 30 stories. That's not right for Louisville, but Louisville could go higher inside the watershed, give us the housing we need, and put it where the neighborhoods are already walkable, more services readily available, and address the issues that people farther out are having, where lots of apartments are going in and the city can't keep up with the infrastructure, roads, water supplies. I don't know how far the sewer district goes, but if you're having to put in septic tanks, that's its own long-term issue. Okay.
So Senator Neal walked in while the speakers were speaking. I didn't want to interrupt. So if you're ready, I just wanted to identify yourself and let everybody know who's here. Who are you?
I'm Senator Gerald Neal. I represent the 33rd Senatorial District, and thank you very much for that, and thanks for everyone who's come out and those who are viewing. Thank you.
Are we in your district, Gerald?
Yes, you are. This is my district.
Good.
Yeah.
That's all we had signed up for tonight. So if anyone, I don't know, Brian, do we have? Okay. So if anyone would like to take 3 minutes, great. If not, then we're going to be adjourned. Mr. McGraw, so first of all, how do you think it went? I know you're very happy with it. No.
I'm very disappointed.
Okay. You got 3 minutes.
Thank you for your opportunities to come tonight. To those of you who are present in this commission tonight, let me thank you for the attention that you have given and for the time that you have put in on this. One of my disappointments, however, is the lack of members of the commission, some of who have not made one single public input meeting. How do you do this justice to this concept when some of the members are not even attending to hear what the public has to say? I'm going to make some recommendations. One recommendation is that something be done where the fire department, board of trustees, or board of directors, however they frame it, are raising tax rates within the taxing districts. I am of the opinion that needs to be done in a more public manner, whether there are notices sent out to all the residents. They've got our addresses because they send us tax bills through the PVA's office. Should not be a problem to send us notice when they're going to have a property owner's election for the board, which ends up raising our taxes. Can raise it up to 10 cents on the $100 just because of an ambulance service. And I could spend an hour or so just talking about the way the ambulance service went, and I'll send you a letter on that. I also think that the zoning commission, and one of the things that you've heard consistently, those of you who have attended these meetings, is concern about infrastructure and zoning, and the fact that they're just building, and destroying the complexion of neighborhoods with large apartment complexes. Who are the members of the Board of Planning and Design who make those decisions and who finalize some of that zoning? If there's not a small city involved, if there's not a home rule city involved, it's the Planning and Design Committee. How are those people selected? I believe there needs to be a method of selecting those individuals in such a manner that they represent the whole county, not just the Urban Services District or within the Watterson Expressway. You have heard a lot. I could probably sit and talk with you for hours about different options and how we can modify some things.
You got a minute, 20 seconds.
I'm going to be finished up by then, I think, Mr. Nemes. I would like to see an in-depth further study, drill down on some of these things. You lost 4 months when you got started in this program last fall because you didn't get a contract signed until January to have the people do the research. At this point, I don't see how you have been able to, with the information you've collected, the time that's involved, I just think it needs to be continued. The development needs to be, the research in this, the whole project needs to continue and need to take some of the issues. I talked with you at one point about the 109 board. They had $4 million in a budget last April, and they're down to less than $2 million. And we had one time that was brought up possibly looking at that, and a particular member of this commission said they don't have any money. Well, I've been able to document they do have money. They have millions of dollars. And I think this commission needs to look at them. There are many aspects of metro government that need to be looked at. You got outside of the Urban Services District, I think you heard real loud and clear. This county has never merged. There may be a merger of the tax bill, but the people haven't merged. Government hasn't merged. Services have not been provided to the outlying areas. Those things need to change, and there's so many areas along those lines. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And I do appreciate, we've got a couple of people up here who are not even involved with government, been here listening. And those of you who are involved with government, thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. McGraw. I would note that you get the award for being at all 6 of the meetings. Yes. All 6 of the meetings.
And I think I've missed one of the actual meetings that I wasn't able to.
So thank you for your attention and participation. Mayor.
My name's Rick Tonini. I'm the mayor of St. Matthews. I wasn't going to speak, but I just wanted to correct some of the things that this gentleman said. The way that the taxes are handled in the suburban fire districts depend completely on the law, Chapter 75. It determines how taxes are raised, and it determines all things with Chapter 75. So if you have a problem with Chapter 75, we have some legislatures here who could change that. But it's not the fire districts that are making decisions. that they do it legally, and it's the way the law is written. What else did you say that I disagreed with? Oh, the Planning Commission, you say, the Planning Commission is set up to study a development. So if a developer comes in and wants to do a development, he takes it to the Planning Commission. It goes through MSD, the Works Department. It's studied by all the professionals in this county. They then have a public hearing, and then they make a decision whether they think it should be approved or not. It then goes to the legislative body, who makes a decision whether it should pass or not. So cities in this county that have zoning rights, they make the decision. Cities or unincorporated areas that do not have zoning rights, it goes to Metro Council for the final decision. So always the final decision on rezoning is done by the elected officials of whatever legislative district it is. It's not, it's done by elected officials, not the Planning Commission. So if the Planning Commission says that this project should be denied, they then send it to St. Matthews, and the final decision is up to St. Matthews whether it goes or not. If it's across the street and it's an unincorporated area, it comes to Metro Council.
Rick, how many cities besides Metro have zoning authority, ultimate authority? I know St. Matthews does.
10.
Douglas Hills does, 10 of them? Okay.
So there's 10 cities, you know, the usual suspects, the Jefferson Towns, the Middletown, St. Matthews. I don't even think, does Prospect have it? Yeah, so there's 10.
Okay.
Do y'all don't have it, do you? Douglas Hills does, okay. But the legislative bodies make the decisions. It's not the Planning Commission. They only recommend to the legislative body.
And with respect to the fire, I wanted to note, I think you heard Mr. McGraw a little differently than I did. I don't think there was, at least I didn't hear an allegation that there was any kind of impropriety or violating the law. I think he suggested to this commission, maybe to suggest to Frankfurt, that the statute, Chapter 75 be changed to bring more transparency. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, and I want our guys and gals in Chapter 75 boards to hear this. I don't think anybody has said that they're acting improperly.
No,
He's
I
saying the
agree.
statute should be changed to bring more transparency.
I agree that Chapter 75 has some odd ways of doing things. They have elections for property holders, and it's on a Saturday in June. And no one, I mean, it's advertised. It's advertised in the paper. They put out notices. But some of these fire districts may have 3 voters come by. Now, it's been suggested that they put these elections in November with the general election, but the boundaries don't match up with the boundaries for the general election. So it'd be very difficult to do that. So that's been suggested, but it's always gone back to the same way Chapter 75 was set up in 1943. That's when Chapter 75 passed. I agree. I don't like it that only 3 people vote on a property holder, but it's only someone who has any interest in who the trustees are. It's not great. You know, you need participation in voting, but it just doesn't happen unless somebody's challenging somebody who, you know, it's a big deal, and then you might have quite a few people. But Chapter 75, the fire districts are following the laws that they're made to follow.
I have a question, Chairman. I got Mayor. Hey, Mayor. First of all, thanks for your service to St. Matthews, and I know you've been on the fire board for a long time and been out in the field running through and running into buildings and so forth. But I want to ask you a couple questions, or just maybe one question on the EMS. Could you give the commission your understanding of how the tax structure works within EMS? But in addition to that, could you give a perspective, could y'all provide EMS services on how you serve your district, but also how you might serve outside of your district, and what there might be in terms of any type of compensation or anything like, can you,
Well, it's a long story.
I know, if you can make it short and
Swallows
sweet.
his watch, but no, when Jefferson County and Louisville merged, there were EMS from Jefferson County and Louisville, and basically it had gotten to be where Jefferson County Police was running the ambulances with a paramedic. Louisville had their own EMS that started by Harvey Sloan down in Park Duval, and Harvey Sloan's EMS was doing great. But when they merged all into one, Louisville Metro EMS. And this is just my opinion, but I don't really think that EMS, Louisville has really put the funds, or maybe they haven't put their full weight behind what EMS has done. They've gone from covering the full county, the whole county, and I'm sorry, Chief's not here tonight, but I would say that at times they had maybe up to 30 or ambulances on the street going at one time. Back in the day, Mayor Peyton Hogue, he was the mayor of Anchorage, had a heart attack. And it took EMS forever and a day to get there. So he went to Frankfurt and he started his own EMS, Anchorage EMS. And ever since then, there was only 2 ambulance services in this county, Louisville Metro and Anchorage. I can tell you that St. Matthews was the 3rd department to start EMS. And we started because we just weren't getting service from Louisville Metro EMS. Give you one example. I think I told you all this the other night. We had an injured football player on Trinity High School's field laying there. At that time, or even right now, a fire department can't transport an injured person. And so the fire truck came and he was packaged ready for transport, but it took 45 minutes to get an ambulance to the scene where he could be transported to the hospital. In the meantime, both teams, fans, are sitting in the stands. Here's a kid laying on the field waiting for an ambulance. And we really decided, I mean, so many times they respond to accidents, and you hear the fire department say, radio, could you get me an ETA on EMS? It was just really bad. So we decided that our constituents needed a better service than what they were getting from Louisville EMS, Louisville Metro EMS. So we took it upon ourselves to go to Frankfurt and get a CON, Certificate of Need, and we started our own ambulance service in St. Matthews. Now, you were asking about funding. In 1943, when the legislature came up with Chapter 75, they put a ceiling on fire departments.
For the record, he pointed at Senator Neal when he said that.
He's a senator. So, but you weren't here. You weren't there in 1943. But they put a ceiling of 10 cents on what fire departments could charge per 100 for fire prevention, for fire protection. Of course, back then, most of the fire departments outside Shively and Louisville were rural, and they were volunteer. So the cost was not nearly. Today, these fire departments, some as many as 92% of their revenues go towards paying salaries and benefits. So the fire departments, there's been, when I first came around, there was, in the fire department business, there was 23 fire districts, Chapter 75 fire districts. But right now we have 6 or 7 because they've merged because they couldn't do it by themselves, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not criticizing merger, but today with all the fire departments in Jefferson County are career-based fire departments. You saw, we went ahead and started EMS with career paramedics and EMTs, and it's very expensive.
Mayor, can I ask you a question? What percentage of the runs of your EMS from St. Matthews are outside your district?
Well, I'll get to that in just 1 second. But because now all these fire districts have gotten CON and have created their own EMS departments. So right now I think there's 28 ambulances within the suburban fire districts, and I don't know a number, so please don't hold me to this, but there might be 9 Louisville Metro ambulances on the street.
I think the information we've received is there are 11.
11? I don't know.
There were 25 at merger, and now there are 11.
So, but they're not always on the street. So at any rate, it's come to a point now where the suburban ambulances that are being paid for by the taxes of their constituents, they're making 60% of their runs outside their district. And it's because Louisville Metro has not stepped up to the table and done their part.
So, Mr. Tenney, I think that answers Ms. Young's question. Mr. Fleming asked you a question on the cost. So you got to the point where you were...
Well,
let me finish the question. So St. Matthews merged, or you guys decided to do EMS services.
Yep.
Then what happened? How did you pay for that? I think that's what Mr. Fleming is asking.
Well, because they created an ambulance service, it allowed fire districts, their firefighting budget had to stop at 10 cents. That was the ceiling. And it's been like that since 1943. Could you imagine buying a fire truck for the same thing you bought one in 1943? But what a lot of these districts have done is, and this is completely honest, they have put on fire districts so that they could get another 10 cents to charge in their taxes. Because believe it or not, EMS and ambulances and personnel cost a lot of money. And they have to have that or they will cease to exist. Now, I think the districts that are out there right now are in great shape financially, but St. Matthews, for example, we didn't add that 10 cents to our tax rate. We were at 10 cents, and now we've added another 5 cents since we started an ambulance. We could go to 10, but we don't need it, and we're not going to charge more than we need. So I disagree that everything's done in the dark and not in the light of day. All of the trustees' meetings are advertised, and the public is welcome to every meeting. I will fully admit that not many visitors come to those meetings. And I don't know if it's just because people don't care or because it's just a time of day or whatever that they can't make it.
So, Mayor, I want to ask another question, please. So here's my question. Anchorage Middletown, from what I understand, does about 40% outside their district runs. So my question is, when you do a run outside of your district, who pays for that run? Who do you bill the patient for that run? Or if you do a run somewhere that's outside St. Matthews, who pays for the gas and for the run and for, I think that's what I'm trying to know is, am I paying for a run that goes to, this happened to me. I had an event, my EMS left. I asked where they were going. They said to 23rd and Duncan, which they needed the ambulance, but my question was, who pays for that? I was told if they couldn't bill Medicare or Medicaid, then I, as the Anchorage Middletown Fire District tax person, paid for that run downtown. So I think that's one of the questions maybe that folks are asking.
Well, there's no question that constituents of that fire district, through their property taxes, pay for the running of the ambulance service and the fire department. Yes, if you make a dispatched run to wherever it is, outside your district, inside your district, if you transport, and only if you transport to the hospital, can you charge for that run. And if the person you just transported doesn't have insurance, you get paid nothing.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you have any data that you can tell us tonight?
You know, I don't, and
Let me finish my question,
I'm
please.
sorry.
On the number of such runs where your EMS is not compensated by the patient?
I'm the chairman of the board of the trustees, but I don't have that type of statistical
Okay,
information.
understood.
I can get you someone who can give you, as a matter of fact, he'll give you so much information you won't want him to bring you anymore. But
Okay, well, that may be something we'd ask for. Let me ask you this. You said that I think you said the figure was 60% of the runs are outside
St. Matthews.
St. Matthews, is that
And I
correct?
guarantee you, before St. Matthews and all the other districts, it probably was more like 70%
Well,
of the
I want to
runs
focus
from
on St.
Anchorage,
Matthews.
Middletown were outside.
Is that what it is in St. Matthews, 60%?
60%.
Okay. And do you have any sense of what the runs from Metro into St. Matthews are? The numbers or the percentage?
It's very low.
Okay. Thanks.
Matter of fact, like I say, if all of our trucks are busy, we got 6 ambulances. If all of our trucks are busy, then the next closest ambulance will be dispatched. A lot of times it's Anchorage, Middletown, Jeffersontown. Fern Creek now has taken over Puchel and Camp Taylor, and so a lot of those runs come over to us or we go to them. But, you know, we spend, I'm sure anybody that has noticed, you'll see St. Matthews ambulances in all areas of this county.
Yes, and speaking of that, do you all have any kind of arrangement under which you reimburse each other when one system services the constituents of the other?
We are very cooperative, and if there's an emergency and our help is needed somewhere, or Anchorage Middletown's help is needed somewhere, we go.
Well, I'm trying to understand whether or not there's any compensation for
No
that.
compensation.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to expand on that. When we went through a bill that dealt with ambulance and so forth, this became a very tough subject to talk about and to deal with. So when, I mean, the fire and EMS, I think they have an obligation to respond. And when the dispatch, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but when a dispatch comes out, you respond, and it's almost on a first come, first served basis. So St. Matthews, because I live right between St. Matthews and then Middletown Anchorage, which used to be Heritage Creek. I'm on the edge. So when I fell many years ago, St. Matthews came, even though I was in Hunting Creek, because their station's right down the street. They get paid, but Heritage Creek came, and they don't get paid in order to transport me down there. Now, one thing we are looking at that we put through in the General Assembly, just to let you know, through our task force, is to look at compensating these runs, no matter if they're secondary or tertiary in a response. Even though they don't transport, looking at compensating that, because there is a cost incurred on it, because they are providing a service in order to, in a life-saving measure, and doing that. So whoever gets there first, they take them, they get paid for it. But we shouldn't turn a blind eye to those folks that did respond and try to provide that service. So I just want to give you sort of perspective, and I want to make sure I think I spoke correctly.
You did.
Well, I wanted to understand, when you say they get paid, who is the they and who pays them?
The transport and the insurer.
Insurance company, but it's also Medicaid will pay for it as well.
Okay, thank you.
And that's only in the situation where the run is being made outside of the particular district. You do not do that for St. Matthew residents because they're already paying tax for the service.
Correct.
Well,
Right.
wait, what don't they do for St. Matthews?
So here's what I understand. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think I can make this relatively simple. So the resident of St. Matthews pays 15 cents for fire and EMS.
Right.
In addition to paying for Louisville EMS, right?
Yes,
Right.
well, that's a
Oh,
separate tax.
That's right, and so, just as it is across the county. So if the person in St. Matthews has a heart attack, likely, but not every time, but most of the time, the St. Matthews EMS will respond and take that lady, let's call her Miss Jones. We'll take Miss Jones, let's say Miss Smith, because Earl Jones, let's not say Miss Jones.
Thank you.
They'll take Miss Smith to the hospital, and there'll be no charge because Miss Smith already pays the tax for the St. Matthews EMS. Okay, so if,
Is that, is that a response? Is that a yes?
it is.
Yes,
So if that person has insurance, the insurance, there's no bill to the insurance or to that individual?
no, they're already paying property taxes for that
Okay.
service.
Thank you.
So let's go on down the line a little bit. If Anchorage Middletown responds to Mrs. Smith in St. Matthews, because of the agreement that you guys have, Anchorage Middletown will transport her and not charge, because it's understood that when you come into Anchorage Middletown's district and transport Ms. Nemes, then you're not going to charge for that. That's an interlocal agreement you guys have, right?
I'm not 100% sure whether that's charged or not. I was going to ask, did Mike Reardon ever come and speak before this?
He hasn't.
Well, I asked him to, but
Okay.
he's the guy with all the answers.
So let me finish the loop here. We don't know the answer to that question. I think what I said is right, but it might be wrong. But when when St. Matthews goes in to Miss Thompson, who lives in the USD, which does not live in St. Matthews, she's not paying the tax for St. Matthews EMS, and she's not paying any other tax, except she is paying for Louisville EMS like everybody else in the county is. In that situation, if Miss Thompson has insurance, St. Matthews EMS then bills her insurance, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So just for the citizens that are watching, this can be very complex. So we're talking about fire and EMS as if it's the same thing. They're very different. So fire has USD. So Louisville Fire is only paid for by USD. The people outside the county do not pay taxes for Louisville Fire.
That is correct.
Okay.
Urban Services District.
They pay taxes for, we've heard Chapter 75 here. Chapter 75 are fire districts. There's a number of them outside of the old USD. There's PRP, there's Anchorage Middletown, there's J-Town, and so forth and so on. And that is a different tax rate. So if you're talking about fire, nobody pays double for fire. I pay Anchorage Middletown only. Gerald pays Louisville Fire only.
Right.
That's fire. Now we're talking about EMS. This is the important part to make sure that we don't conflate these two things. I pay Louisville EMS, and so does Gerald.
Right.
Because he lives in USD. I also pay Anchorage Middletown on top of that, and that is an extra 6 cents per $100 of my property values. Various other places, PRP pays 10 cents, some others pay 5, yours pay 5 at St. Matthews. That's in addition to the Louisville EMS tax that everybody in the county already pays.
Correct.
So it's important that we distinguish between fire and EMS.
It is when you're talking about what monies go to where. Louisville Fire and Shively are the only two municipal fire departments in this county. All the rest of the fire departments are Chapter 75.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, the commission itself is interested in this topic, and there's a lot of information or data that's been surfaced. I think we need, given the amount of attention paid to it, a lot more data or information about exactly how these things work. For example, I'd like to know what have been the rates of increase for EMS services or taxes rather inside the USD over the years, and whether or not that might, in other words, whether or not those rate increases would have been sufficient to cover the entire county, as an example, and the extent to which then these interdepartmental agreements are paid for or not, whether there's any kind of switching between them in terms of funding, so that we can have a fuller understanding of exactly what's going on. We obviously understand that people in the county are paying for services locally as well as what they pay for in terms of their metro taxes. The question is, what is the cost of those services overall, and how the burden being shared to the extent it can be shared equitably? That's a question of that
Right.
an evaluation that needs to be made.
And we need that from fire on one side and
Yes.
EMS, right? I would ask Mr. Tonini if we could have your guy, your person that you said will give us a lot of information. I don't want a ton of information, but I do want 3 pieces of information. And I'll write this down for you, but I want to make sure this is understandable. Number 1, I want to know how many St. Matthews, and this will let us, we have this from our data analyst, but this will be a good quality control experiment as well if we get it directly from you guys at St. Matthews. Number 1, I want to know how many runs St. Matthews makes. Let me say St. Matthews Linden. That makes me feel better, Mr. McCraney. Does it make you feel better? Because they merged. That's right. Well, I'm only Linden, so I'm going to say St. Matthews Linden. So how many runs did St. Matthews Linden make outside of St. Matthews Linden? Point number 1.
Fire and EMS or just fire and just EMS?
I want them both. Yeah, because I know we make some fire. We used to not, because we had a fire in St. Matthews where we had a tragedy, and that's why we've had the closest box rule, but that's only been 5 years or so. So I want fire and EMS broken out, all 3 of these. How many runs out St. Matthews Linden outside the St. Matthews Linden district? Number 2, how many runs by whom? So I'm really interested in Louisville EMS more than anything, but and by whom? So Anchorage, Middletown, whatever. How many runs that into St. Matthews Linden's district were covered by not St. Matthews Linden fire EMS? Understand that? That's number 2. Number 3 is, how many times when you guys went out of St. Matthews Linden were you able to bill for those services and receive compensation? Fair?
It's fair,
Come to the mic. I don't know if anybody's, they can't hear you if you're online.
we do have that information.
He said they do have that information. Thank you.
Well, if you're going to provide that information, someone needs to come to testify respecting that information so they can be examined. We just can't take a data dump.
I have a person come and meet with you at this committee.
We have a meeting next Friday. I think that will be our suggestion. Gerald?
Yes.
This lady here, if you would say your name for the record, and then you're on, and then Kramer, and then we'll go back around for the second after everyone has been able to speak. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come up and speak tonight. I was not planning on speaking.
What is your name?
Yes, sir. I apologize. My name's Melvina Marie O'Brien, and I'm 7 generations strong Louisvillian. So my family's been here a while. I wasn't going to speak this evening. However, I saw that not too many people were here, and we don't have access for people to speak from their homes or their living rooms. And I decided that I wanted to bring a voice for my family and for folks that are not here. What I'd like to talk about is to support what Mr. McGraw was saying about including the voices of people in the outlying counties area, Jefferson County, into the decision-making process. My family's been here for 7 generations, as I said. I've been back home in the area for 8 years. The time I was away after graduating from JCPS, I'm a product of JCPS public schools from pre-K all the way through graduation. I was gone and lived in 7 different states and the island of Guam. So I feel like in coming back 8 years ago, I'm just now trying to catch up with all that's happened in the world and in Louisville and in our area with a world that's changing every few seconds. I live in the Central Business District. My mom lives in Limerick. We have all of my mother, I'm a family of 3 children, and we all live within 4 or 5 blocks of each other downtown here. I grew up in primarily the South End. So my mom, her mother's family, and my daddy's family were in Highland Park. And my mom ended up in Fairdale and then raised us in the South End. There were a few years where we moved a couple different areas of the city, and as I came back and forth early in my 20s, I lived in the Highlands, Old Louisville. I lived in the South End. What I'd like to say, my mother's 78 years old, living in the Limerick area. When I came back, unfortunately, she had.
The time goes fast, and I want you to have time to say what you need to say. You have a minute and a half left. So say what you want to say, but I want to make sure you know what the clock is. Go ahead.
I need to breathe a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm the same to everybody.
When I came home, she had faced extremely terrible living conditions, in my opinion. And granted, I lived 7 different states on the island of Guam. I oftentimes was not aware of what was going on. However, I did try to keep up by reading the Courier-Journal, reading online once we had the internet, and by watching your meetings when they were televised and I had the opportunity to. The voice I'd like to bring is that rural area, what I consider rural. It's a little bit different in today's world, but the Jefferson County voice. Good people and families who have invested very heavily into the downtown arts district and into all of our services, 4 generations, 7 generations strong in my family. I'd like to bring that voice because many of them, as you know, one of the reasons probably to merger. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the reasons because I wasn't here. But one of the reasons everybody moved out of the area. But potentially, and in my mother's case, moving back into the downtown area, especially with us younger people coming home after we've been educated and traveled the world, a lot of our families are wanting to be downtown where there are services and there are good streets and it's walkable and we're building a sustainable community. That's the voice I'd like to bring, and thank you, Mr. McGraw, for bringing that up. Having the Jefferson County folks that potentially have grown up, have been here for a long time, bring their voice to the decision-making process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Mr. Kramer.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Kramer. I'm Metro Council Representative District 11. I too was not planning on speaking. I'm encouraged to hear the conversation about suburban fire. I'm sincerely hopeful that you guys will take a much deeper dive into that. I don't think we're able to scratch the surface of what those realities are tonight. I would just reiterate what's already been said. At merger, there were 24, 25 ambulances on the street. Today, Metro Louisville has 11 ambulances on the street. The reason that you see such a reduction is because suburban fire departments have added ambulances in part to take care of the services needed, but in part because they realize as running suburban fire departments becomes more expensive, one way to generate more revenue is to add ambulance service. So again, please do a deeper dive there. It's not fair to talk about the Urban Service District Fire Department as if it fits into that Chapter 75. They are very different realities. Also, when you start talking about how much money the Urban Service District pays in taxes and how that's spent, how that's appropriated, please know that that's not an easy calculation either. So when you're doing your research, make sure you look at that. For example, the Urban Service District is responsible for fire protection. That's been said several times, and that's quite accurate. However, the Urban Service District doesn't delineate. There's not a clear separation of things as fundamental to fire departments as equipment. So when a new fire truck is purchased, a new fire engine is purchased, that's not purchased out of Urban Service District taxes. That's paid for by metropolitan government. And so to your point, when you say, citizens aren't paying for ambulance service, they are. Before merger, Metro Louisville had a fire-based EMS. Jefferson County did not. At merger, the decision was that we would do away with that fire-based service in the city of Louisville and that we would roll with one countywide ambulance service. That in and of itself changed the dynamic from pre-merger to post-merger, right? If the EMS was part of the fire protection district before merger and the urban service district tax was supposed to cover that, then the urban service district tax was supposed to cover ambulance service in the old urban service district. When you take it out of there, that changed again, it changed the dynamic. So I appreciate the conversation around fire protection. Please do a deeper dive. I appreciate that you can't just have somebody, dump information. But there are some really hard questions to be answered around that EMS versus suburban fire. And I was just telling Councilwoman McCraney, a number of years ago, we pointed out to the mayor at the time that we were putting money in the city's budget to pay for ambulance service that we knew wasn't being provided. We tried to make the argument, you're claiming that you've got all these ambulances on the street when in fact we know they're not actually on the street. So at least own it, admit you're not paying for them, and then use that money to do something else. And we couldn't get the mayor at the time to acknowledge that was true. He just kept putting the money in the EMS budget, and then later he would move the money out of the EMS because EMS couldn't spend it because they didn't have any ambulances. So again, find those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head. I appreciate that Mayor Tonini doesn't have them off the top of his head either, but those numbers are available. Please find them and make sure that as you move in, that's included as a part of the conversation. And I'm not challenging, as Representative Nemes, I'm not challenging, but I believe there's been conversation about filing insurance claims with anybody that's transported in any ambulance. So the recommendation, the suggestion has been made that Metro Louisville would charge insurance whenever we transport. If we can charge insurance when we transport, I don't know why suburban cities can't charge insurance when they transport. I don't know if that's true or not.
It could be. There's different chapters in the CARE Act.
So-
My understanding is Anchorage Middletown does not, and neither do any other 75s. I don't know about Louisville Metro.
But if Louisville Metro does, I don't know why. Again, I'm only putting that out there for you guys to do the work. I don't have the answers. I only am getting more and more questions as I'm listening to your discussion. And I agree. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I know it's a monumental task.
Hold on, I think Mr. Jones has a question for you.
Yeah, I did. Who would you suggest that we speak with for this additional information on EMS and fire that you were suggesting was available?
I think Mr. Reardon would be a good choice.
Mr. Reardon is who? I'm not with the city.
That's the same one that Mayor Tonini had recommended.
Is he with St. Matthews?
He was with the former Jefferson County EMS.
Who on the current Jefferson County the Metro EMS would you suggest we talk with?
I think, Mr. Jones, that's where you're going to run into some problems because Metro EMS has a very different attitude about this than does suburban fire.
So we'll ask the mayor.
I understand that. So the question is nonetheless.
I think I would go at this from two perspectives.
Okay.
Jody Myman is certainly the person in Metro Louisville that you want to talk to.
How do you spell
Write
the
that
last
name
name?
down, Jody Myman.
How do you spell the last name, please?
MEIMAN, I believe.
Okay.
And he's exceptional. You guys
It's
will be impressed
Ian.
with him. Is it Ian?
Ian.
Yeah, he's really good. You'll be impressed with him.
Okay.
At the same time, right, head of EMA, and he's really good. At the same time, you may want to talk to somebody who is with Suburban Fire, and the gentleman that
We have Sean Driesbach is
there.
on
You go.
our-
Sean Driesbach is the new guy. He just took over probably 4 months ago, but Sean Driesbach. So I would get in touch with both of them. Honestly, I'd have them both offer testimony.
Great.
That'd be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Kramer, I want to ask a question. Would it be safe to assume, or would you agree with the statement that capital expenditures mainly are financed by bonding issues to support EMS equipment that is paid for by all citizens?
Under the previous mayor, almost all capital projects were funded by bonding. So, yes.
Okay.
I would say that the equipment that we currently have, that we've paid for, that equipment largely was paid for with bonds. I don't know what the current mayor has a different attitude about bonding, but still, I mean, okay. When you buy, fire engines, you guys are well aware, they're well over $1 million. So typically that would end up being
And again, we're
bonded.
conflating the two. The question, I don't know if he intended to ask this question. I think he intended fire, but his question was when EMS capital projects, which is different than fire, it is appropriate that every taxpayer pay for every EMS expenditure. It's a countywide service. So, and then you mentioned fire trucks.
My answer would be the same. Pretty much, if we had a capital expenditure under the previous mayor, we paid for capital expenditures by borrowing money. We did very little pay-go.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sarah Fisher. I have a general question, if you all wouldn't mind answering. Kind of unrelated to taxes, but going back to development and spurring development, building within the Waterson versus outside. Has there been any discussion of looking at giving Metro Louisville, especially inside the urban service district, more flexible tax ability, like implementing a land value tax? So we have, I know within the urban service district, we have a lot of issues with people holding on to land and just letting them either sit vacant or turn into parking lots that have a very low property value but high income level, just to wait to speculatively holding that. So has there been any discussion of giving Louisville Metro more flexible tax policy? Because I believe that's not allowable under state law, or any type of transit-oriented development taxes. Just giving inside the Waterson more flexibility to kind of spur that development within it, so it doesn't expand out to the outerlying suburbs that a lot of people I've heard seem to be concerned about that. I mean, I am as well. So that's a question for you all, if you don't mind asking or bringing that to your attention if you haven't.
Maybe Representative Fleming could answer the question. I know that there are different tax abilities for inside the USD, because inside the USD does pay for 3 services, as you know, because you've been watching: fire, garbage, and light, that we don't pay outside USD. We do subsidize for $15 million, so what you pay doesn't cover the services, but you do have a higher tax rate for those 3 services. So I know that you have the ability for that. I don't know more than that. I know you can't charge a sales tax because state law doesn't allow that. I don't know if Ken can add anything to that, but I think that is a very intriguing suggestion, is to give more flexibility inside USD to cover the services that they only provide for themselves.
Yeah, I believe the things I talked about currently are illegal under state law, but I'm not 100% certain, but you have more information.
No, I'll be honest with you. I have to look to see what the law says in terms of flexibility to add on any other type of tax structure. My gut feeling is that the Urban Services District could add that onto it, but that's going to be a decision of the USD and those citizens of that in order to do something like that. I do want to make sure y'all aware of, and I think when you look at things in the aggregate, on the USD services of those, including the fire, streets, and sanitation, if you compare that with a suburban city, of those items, because when you look at when you look at an urban services district, you need to add on fire, and just take an example. Let's take I think it's one city's around, I think it's around 21, 22 cents up per 100. So if you add on fire, and let's take Mr. Teeney's district, you take 16 on or 15 on top of that, that's 37.37 cents per 100. And if you look at USD, it's less. It's around 35 cents, 34 cents. So you can see that there's suburban services or suburban cities might be paying a bit more in terms of getting the services and so forth. They might not getting. So be conscious of that, and don't get all I guess focused on one particular area of the city, because you got to look at things in the aggregate when you look at total tax burden. But I do appreciate it. I will take a look at that statute to see if there is that flexibility to confirm that.
Yeah, and that's something I'd encourage you all to look at too, because I'm familiar how suburban cities work. My family lives in Douglas Hills. I actually called and went through my mom's tax documents to and had her explain it to me. So just giving a little bit more flexibility, because maybe that could spur the growth where we want it more.
I would like that, so we don't have to subsidize USD services anymore.
Yeah,
also.
I mean, I think everyone would like everyone to have more services, and it's finding the best way to do that.
Right.
So, Ms. Fisher, I'm curious, what services do you believe would be enhanced by some additional tax revenue that the Urban Services District citizens would approve or vote for?
I think something that would really, so I know there is a lot of concerns about vacant properties and underutilized properties. So something that has a small single structure or is completely vacant and unused to maybe spur some of these denser developments,
So
or
you're talking
even
about incentives of one kind or another for development?
incentives or incentives to develop, because there's a lot of
Yes.
speculative holding of those lands, especially in areas that might be facing a lot of gentrification pressure. So there's just, you walk around areas and you see very nice houses, but then there's a swath of undeveloped land, houses that have been vacant for years, and it's people who are typically holding them because they have a very low tax burden, because they haven't been, because we're taxed on the property, enhancements, not the actual value of the land themselves. So in these high value areas, maybe taxing the land or giving the ability to tax the land if there hasn't been a certain amount of improvements would give us more flexibility to spur growth, because I think that is what people complain about, seeing blighted properties, blighted lands, and being able to spur development and improvement there, which, and I mean, I think generally people would be willing to pay more taxes for maybe just enhanced transit. Actually, like, there's a lot of complaints about TARC, but they are very much starved for money, and the services do not come without increased fees. So looking at that, sidewalks, I think that people be willing to pay more if the discussion was gone and it was earmarked in the budget for certain things and adhered to that.
Well, Ms. Fisher, I must say, I know you've attended several of these meetings, and I've attended 6 of them. I have not heard anybody except you rise to speak in favor of increased taxes for more services or for any other purpose. So I applaud your spirit of wanting to improve services by any means, but I'm very skeptical that that would be something that people would want. That's my only point. Just my opinion based on what I've heard.
Yeah, that could be a position of mine, but I think if people start to see a drastic degradation in services, they'll get angry, and then that conversation might be discussed.
Okay,
Thank you. Senator Nemes.
Yes, thank you. A couple things on vacant properties. The state did pass a bill to help the city be able to take them back in a better way, in a quicker way. The other thing is, it is the PVA's responsibility to tax the property for its best use. So if they're not doing that, as you alluded to make it where they have a, where they can do that, they already are supposed to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's a good idea. We'll look into the flexibility. If they don't use it, they don't use it, but they should be able to have that opportunity.
Of course, it's just having the ability.
Yep.
And once again, once again with the tax raises, just looking at it, probably will be voted down. I mean, I might vote it down. I don't like paying more.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. McGraw.
A couple of comments. Very much appreciate you've heard this evening what I have believed all along with the ambulance service, that the prior mayor had his priorities and he spent the money somewhere else instead of providing the ambulance service to everybody. I think that is something that needs to be considered in the process. I fully agree. Need to drill down much further than that. I was on the Jefferson County EMS when it started. I was an EMT in 1977. I am an EMT today. I have kept that EMT status. I have been involved in emergency medical service as an attorney. I have represented the nation's largest and the nation's 10th largest ambulance services and have gone into federal court and litigation. So I've got a fairly extensive background when it comes to ambulance services and things of that type, and I think we need to look at it. Next comments I'd like to address to Mayor Denini. I don't think we're in agreement, and I'm sorry I'm going to speak to the mic so it's up here, but I hope you'll understand and hear it. I don't think we're in really any disagreement. I believe that the state law is what covers the fire departments. I meant no disparaging inference to the fire departments and my involvement with emergency services, retired police officer, EMS, know a lot of people on the fire departments. One of my better friends is a former chief of one of the departments, and another, probably one of the best friends, is a chief of another fire department. So I've got a lot of involvement there, no disparaging thoughts whatsoever. But I do believe there probably are some things that can be done in the state law which will help address more public support, maybe more public involvement in that taxing situation, because it is a taxing authority. As far as zoning is concerned, I agree. It is the legislative body that makes the final decisions. But the legislative body, as we're finding in Mayor Jung, as I dealing with we're familiar with the situation which gets into that, as to just how much authority does the legislative body have when they get the recommendation from planning and design, and planning and design says, this is what we think you should do. Now, got a couple of council members here that I understand that Metro government even went as far as to Metro Council turned down a developer a couple of years ago on a design. After some modifications came back, that particular developer sued Metro government. After some changes, that design was actually approved, and he continued his lawsuit because he was alleging loss of income for his development because of the delays on the legislative body having turned it down. And there are so many issues like that. I think it's one of those many issues I think you need to really drill down in and look at what can we do, what do we need to do to make some changes. Yes, the legislative body does make the final decision, but what kind of a situation is that legislative body put into based upon a recommendation from planning and design? All of the mayors of the small cities that spoke to you this past week, the ones that have got zoning authority, same situation. What do they have to do? They have to look at that design, that recommendation from planning and design, and they can make a finding of fact that's different from what was found in that design, but they're subject to litigation, things of that type. So it's a very sensitive issue, and if we had representatives from out in the East End, out in the South End, you heard people from Valley Station complaining about developments, so many things. I had great hopes for this mayor. However, when I look at his administrative staff, the people at the top in his office, as I understand, 6 of them all live within the Urban Services District. 1 of them lives in Shelby County. Not one person living outside of the Watterson Expressway. What kind of representation is the rest of the county getting? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. Florsheim.
Yes.
All right.
I just wanted to back up Ms. Fisher as some, nobody likes paying taxes, but I feel like I'm getting a pretty good deal living in Louisville, and with good management, I could see paying a little more. Taxes are pretty low here compared to other places I've been around the country. We got it pretty good.
Thank you, Mr. Florsheim. Ms. O'Brien, I cut you off. Would you like some more time?
Not unless you have questions.
Thank you.
Residents. No, thank you
Okay.
very much.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
both
ma'am.
Mr. Chairmans, I just want to say it's been an honor to work with all of you all. I have learned so much from being able to go out into our county and listen to our folks. I have written down every question of every answer of every public person that asks a question. The next few days, I will be going through those for you all, just for my own satisfaction. How many folks had planning and zoning questions? How many had Floyd's Fork questions? Other types of things. Just my synopsis of what I've heard. But I take this very seriously, and I want to thank you all for being professional, and we're learning a lot, especially out in the South End when the lights went out and they were talking about not getting services. That was a highlight of the book I will be writing. So thank you all so much.
I'm not sure I want to read that book, but we may have some stories that are better told in the dark, I suspect. Well, if no one else has any other comments, I think we're getting ready to adjourn the meeting. Nope.
A question.
Yes, sir.
What's the meeting schedule? You mentioned something about Friday after this. That's the 11th.
The 11th is the next meeting.
Is there something on the 18th?
I thought it was the third Friday.
It's
It's been the second. Let's
yeah,
see.
it's
Let me double check.
So it will be the 11th for sure.
you're confirming, right, Brian? Yes.
3 o'clock, right?
Will that be available by Zoom?
Yes, WebEx will be here.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.